Bangladesh, a land born from the dream of religious harmony, often falls short of its promise for its Hindu minority. Though officially a secular nation, the reality for many Hindus is one of fear, discrimination, and a constant struggle for equality. This essay will delve into the multifaceted challenges faced by Hindus in Bangladesh, exploring their experiences with violence, prejudice, and systemic disadvantages. Hindus, once a significant part of the region's social fabric, now constitute a shrinking minority. Their dwindling numbers tell a story of displacement, forced migration, and a constant sense of vulnerability, from blatant acts of violence to subtle yet pervasive forms of discrimination. The challenges they face are numerous and deeply rooted in social, political, and economic structures. Understanding their plight is crucial not only for ensuring the rights of a vulnerable community, but also for upholding the secular ideals upon which Bangladesh was founded. This is not just a story of religious persecution, it is a story of human rights violations that demand attention and action. For many Hindus in Bangladesh, practicing their faith openly can be a dangerous act. Temples, homes, and businesses become targets of vandalism, arson, and looting, particularly during times of political unrest or religious festivals. The threat of violence hangs heavy, creating an atmosphere of fear and insecurity. One such incident involved the brutal attack on the Ramna Kali Mandir in Dhaka during the 1971 Liberation War, a stark reminder of the vulnerability of religious minorities. More recently, the widespread violence following the 2013 Shahbag protests, where Hindu homes and businesses were targeted, highlighted the precariousness of their existence. These acts of violence are not just physical, they are deeply traumatic, leaving behind psychological scars that last generations. The destruction of places of worship, the desecration of sacred spaces, and the constant fear of being targeted for their faith erode the community's sense of belonging and security. The discrimination faced by Hindus in Bangladesh extends beyond acts of violence, seeping into everyday life. From education and employment to access to justice and political participation, they encounter systemic disadvantages that limit their opportunities and create an uneven playing field. Many Hindus, especially in rural areas, face obstacles in accessing quality education, often relegated to underfunded schools with limited resources. This disparity in educational opportunities perpetuates a cycle of poverty and limits their prospects for upward mobility. In the workplace, Hindus often face discrimination, finding it harder to secure jobs, particularly in government sectors. They are often passed over for promotions, and their contributions are often undervalued or ignored, creating a sense of alienation and injustice. One of the most horrific realities faced by Hindus, particularly women and girls, is the threat of forced conversion and abduction. These acts of violence are often shrouded in silence, with victims too afraid to speak out or seek justice due to social stigma and fear of reprisals. Driven by a complex mix of religious fanaticism, patriarchal control, and economic vulnerability, these incidents leave lasting scars on individuals, families, and the community as a whole. Young girls are abducted, forced to convert to Islam, and married off against their will, their lives forever altered. The lack of effective law enforcement and the reluctance of authorities to address these crimes create a climate of impunity, emboldening perpetrators and perpetuating a cycle of violence and fear. The stories of these women and girls are a stark reminder of the vulnerability of minorities and the urgent need for justice and protection. Section 5. Losing ground, land grabbing and property disputes. Land, a source of livelihood and security, has become a point of contention for many Hindus in Bangladesh. The Vested Property Act, though intended to return property seized during the 1971 war, has been misused to dispossess Hindus of their land, leaving them vulnerable and economically marginalized. Powerful individuals and groups, often with political connections, exploit legal loopholes and exert undue influence to grab land belonging to Hindus, particularly those living in rural areas. This practice not only deprives them of their property rights, but also undermines their economic stability and forces them to live in a constant state of insecurity. The process of reclaiming their land is often arduous, expensive, and fraught with bureaucratic hurdles, leaving many feeling helpless and disillusioned with the justice system. The issue of land grabbing highlights the deep-seated prejudice and power imbalances that continue to plague the community. Section 6. Political pawns, lack of representation and exploitation. Despite their significant numbers, Hindus in Bangladesh lack adequate political representation. This lack of voice in the corridors of power renders them vulnerable to exploitation and limits their ability to influence policies that directly affect their lives. While some political parties may pay lip service to minority rights during elections, they often fail to address the community's concerns once in power. This lack of genuine political will to address the systemic issues faced by Hindus perpetuates their marginalization and reinforces their sense of being second-class citizens. The absence of strong Hindu voices in government and decision-making positions allows for discriminatory policies to be enacted and for their concerns to be ignored. This lack of representation further entrenches the power imbalances and reinforces the cycle of vulnerability. Section 7. Trapped in poverty, economic hardship and limited opportunities. Economic hardship is a harsh reality for a large segment of the Hindu population in Bangladesh, particularly those living in rural areas. Discrimination in access to education, employment, and credit traps many in a cycle of poverty, limiting their life choices and opportunities for upward mobility. Many Hindus rely on agriculture for their livelihood, yet they often lack access to credit, modern farming techniques, and fair market prices for their produce. This economic vulnerability makes them dependent on others, often belonging to the majority community, for their survival, further reinforcing power imbalances and perpetuating their marginalized status. The lack of economic empowerment not only affects their material well-being, but also limits their access to healthcare, education, and other essential services, creating a vicious cycle that is difficult to break. Section 8. The difficult choice, exodus, and the search for security. Faced with constant insecurity, discrimination, and limited opportunities, many Hindus in Bangladesh are making the difficult choice to leave their homeland. This exodus, driven by a desperate search for safety and a better future for their children, is a telling indictment of their situation. Families are uprooting themselves, leaving behind their ancestral lands, homes, and communities in search of a more inclusive and tolerant society where they can live without fear. This migration comes at a great personal cost, severing social ties, cultural connections, and a sense of belonging. The continuous flow of Hindus out of Bangladesh is not just a loss for the community, it is a loss for the nation, draining it of its diversity, talent, and the richness of its cultural tapestry. It is a stark reminder of the human cost of intolerance and the urgent need to address the root causes of this displacement. Section 9. A call for action, international support, and the hope for a better future. The plight of Hindus in Bangladesh demands attention and action, not just from the Bangladeshi government, but also from the international community. Addressing the deep-rooted prejudices, systemic discrimination, and climate of impunity requires a multi-pronged approach that involves legal reforms, social awareness campaigns, and economic empowerment initiatives, strengthening law enforcement, ensuring swift justice for perpetrators of violence, and repealing discriminatory laws such as the Vested Property Act are crucial steps towards creating a more equitable society. Promoting interfaith dialogue, educating the younger generation about tolerance and respect for diversity, and empowering marginalized communities are essential for fostering a more inclusive society. The international community can play a vital role by holding the Bangladeshi government accountable for protecting the rights of all its citizens, regardless of their faith, by shining a light on the injustices faced by Hindus in Bangladesh and supporting organizations working to uphold their rights. We can contribute to a future where they can live with dignity, security, and equal opportunities.